Hello everybody, welcome to this episode of Talking Tendons. It's going to be a brief episode. I want to focus today on the most recent installment of the isometric evidence story, and this is a paper by Sinead Holden and co-authors. Michael Rathleff is one of them, Henrik Reel, many others. So the title of the paper is Isometric Exercise in Pain in Patella Tendinopathy, a randomized crossover trial. It's basically a carbon copy in a patella tendinopathy cohort of the paper published by Ebony Rio and co-workers Jill Cook, etc., from La Trobe University some years ago now. And that obviously, so the story goes that paper showed some really dramatic reductions in immediate and 45 minutes after pain measured with a loading test, so a single leg decline squat in patella tendinopathy, and they also showed they had a neurophysiology component in that study where they looked at change in cortex, motor cortex inhibition, and there was a reversal of inhibition after the intervention. And the big ticket item in that study was that the isometric intervention was better at changing those outcomes than was that is pain and motor cortex as compared to the isotonic. Now, in this carbon copy study, so this is a repeat, and I think it's great to do repeat studies like this because science is something that is self-correcting, and we need studies that replicate and see if we can replicate. The differences with this study is that they didn't include the neurophysiological component, so they weren't looking at changes in anything that was going on in the brain in terms of motor function. They just looked at pain, and they did identical methods. It seems like pretty similar methods, and they had a larger cohort. So instead of 6 people, they had 20 people. And the real, I guess, take-home message and key point is that in this study, they had far less benefit overall. And I think that's the key finding for me. The benefit from isometrics is small, so there was maybe a 1 or 2 point overall mean difference pre and post. So does isometrics improve short-term pain? Yes, it probably does, even according to this study, but the effects is quite small. Interestingly, it's similar to the effects that we found in the study we published last year in a patella tendon cohort. Lead author on that was Steve Pearson. If you email me, I can send you the paper, but it's Pearson et al., published in Clinical Journal of Sports Medicine. So similar to the Sinead Holden, and we had 8 participants. So now we've got 3 studies in patella tendon, 2 showing probably small effects from isometrics, 1 showing a large effect, and that's the Ebony Rare study. Now, there are multiple explanations for this. One is that the populations are different, and that's possible. So it's possible that in the study by Ebony, she's recruited different people with a different presentation. It's probably not clear from the methods whether that is the case. I know, speaking to Ebony, she did go through a very thorough screening process, and it's potentially possible that she has ended up with a different population. It's hard to tell because everyone has reported the methods in similar ways, and even in the Holden paper they report following the methods and the inclusion-exclusion criteria. But it's one thing to, I guess, report it, and another thing in the sort of practice of it. So that's one point. The second potential explanation, the second point to consider, is that there is this is a chance finding. So it's possible that the 6 people that Ebony had in her study were responders, and it was by chance. It's probably very, very unlikely, but that's a potential other explanation. If these people were just responders and they did better, and they just happened to be people that responded to that type of intervention. Possibly a third is the instructions that were given. So the instructions to people, and obviously you want the same instructions to both groups, but the instructions may have influenced the outcome of, what we tell people about what to expect during the exercise may have been influenced the outcome of the study. So, for example, in the Holden study, in our study, if you're not telling people anything at all, i.e., we didn't tell them, this is going to be really good for you, you're going to get a good response. We just sort of let them do the exercise and then report their pain pre and post. Whereas I know, speaking to Ebony again, she did say to them, this is a safe thing to do, this is going to be okay, it's going to work well for you. But she did also tell me that she did that for both groups. So it's that wouldn't explain the between group differences. So potentially changes in the explanation. So I guess the key thing to take away from all of the literature now, and this is the point of the podcast, is that we actually don't know at the moment what the true effect is, because it's quite variable in the literature, and maybe there are subgroups of people that will respond and others that won't respond. So we still don't know what the true effect is. And where does that leave us as clinicians in the clinic when you're presented with a patellar tendon patient? Well, try different types of exercises. Try isotonic, try isometric. See if that gives you a short-term pain response, and go with whichever one you think is going to be best for doing that. But in the clinical world, where we're treating patients in clinic, generally getting a short-term pain response is not the goal of the game. The goal is to get people better and back to function in the longer term. And for that, isotonic exercise, concentric, eccentric, is the key thing. The only time you would consider isometric is when isotonic is really too painful. So it doesn't really apply. And that's one of my bugbears with this whole isometric literature, is that people are really looking at, short-term pain and what's the best exercise for it, when really that's not a question that, as a clinician treating tendon patients, is at the forefront of my mind. I am thinking about how am I going to get someone better and more functional long-term. No one comes in and says, can you get my pain better for 45 minutes, please? And of course, in the elite sport and competitive world, maybe it is. There are advantages to short-term pain reduction, but I struggle to see them beyond that. Maybe you'd use it clinically as a priming, get your pain down, then do other exercise type intervention, only if they're having a good response to isometrics. But as I say, I just basically keep it simple and just go for load them progressively with whatever they can tolerate. It's often isotonic exercise. There's plenty of uses for isometrics far beyond short-term pain reduction. I've talked about some of those before, like, developing strength and tolerance in certain ranges that are difficult for the individual. You can use isometrics for that as well. So that is all I really wanted to talk about today. I do have a couple of courses coming up, one in Sydney, one in Melbourne in December. So if you're interested in some CPD before Christmas, get in touch with that. That is on the website tendinopathy.rehab.com. And lots of other things going on. I'm going to try and do another one of these podcasts before Christmas. So hopefully see you then.